with Secretary Blinken, Administrator Power, and the head of our Gender Policy Council, Jen Klein, at the White House, to lay out that vision, which underscores financial and digital inclusion as a key component. And that is something that we recognize, that as we are tackling the world's biggest challenges, from the mounting food crisis to growing extreme poverty, that we cannot face these challenges without unlocking the contributions of women, whether it be women farmers or it be unemployed and underemployed women. But to do that, to unlock their contributions, we recognize how critical it is to ensure that women are fully included in digital platforms and in the digital economy. And without that component, we will not succeed in ensuring that women are able to fully contribute to solving the challenges that we are facing together. And that is where we see, for example, that to address the growing gender digital divide, that we have to look at what are the barriers to women and girls' access to technology. We have to look at what happens when women and girls do gain access to information and communication technologies like the internet, recognizing that when they do, that they can face discouraging and dangerous obstacles such as technology-facilitated gender-based violence. So we need to be looking at both how do we increase that access, and then what happens when they gain that access, and be prepared to address those experiences, to address those issues. And this is an area where the US government has also launched a global partnership on gender-based online harassment and abuse, so that we are mobilizing action by governments, by the private sector, by civil society, by research institutions to understand better both how technology facilitated gender-based violence, where and when and how it occurs, and what works to address it, what steps are needed, and mobilize that work together. And these are all pieces. I'll just note that we are making these commitments not just in the gender equality space for USAID and for the US government, but also in our underlying commitments to advancing digital development and digital inclusion and being prepared for a 21st century economy. So you'll see these commitments in USAID's digital strategy in the way that we talk about advancing our vision for open, inclusive, and secure digital ecosystem. That those broader conversations together, and the broader digital conversation, digital economy conversation we're having, that these need to elevate and underscore these same commitments to gender equality, to safe and equal access to technology resources. Now, I will highlight that based on these commitments, we last week announced a new partnership that we are going to be forming. We've set out this intention together with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to create a platform that we open up to partners around the world, and would love the partners in this room to join us in this effort. And the intent of this partnership is to recognize that we have done work together around closing the gender digital divide, around increasing women's and girls' access to the digital economy. We have learned many lessons together from that, and it is time for us to scale what is working. It is time for us to collectively look at what is that experience, what have we learned, and to accelerate that progress together as partners collectively, so that we can actually see the kinds of results we want to see. Because I think we've all recognized many partners have invested in this space. We've learned many important lessons, done some really great work, but we're not yet seeing the outcomes we want to. And so to get to that level, then this is a call to action that we issued last week, and will be continuing to grow, where we really invite partners to join us at this platform, to be committed to scale proven solutions, or to continue to learn together, but to do it in a very proactive way. What are we learning, to share that information and drive that into action where we can? And that's something that, just to as I kind of close, want to recognize that one space of incredible learning and incredible action has been the USAID Microsoft Airband Initiative. and the work that's been done in this collective to help bring internet access to more women around the world. There's been incredible work with local internet service providers and other partners to tackle the gender digital divide, to improve community connectivity, and really important lessons from that. And so we are really eager to highlight that work, to learn from it, and to look at what are the next steps, how do we scale this? So this work includes, for example, in Guatemala, partnering with the local internet service provider New Sun Road, that opened 10 solar-powered community centers that are offering digital literacy, women's entrepreneurship programs to indigenous communities. It includes work in Colombia with Anditel, that has 6 active community connectivity centers and collaborated with 1,200 women in cocoa and beekeeping cooperatives. In Ghana, Bluetown with its 4 active community centers and its partnership with the Hunger Project. In Kenya with Mwangu and its hotspots. In India, working with Airjaldi with its training of women on basic literacy skills. And again, just a few of these examples. What have we learned and how can we scale this together so that we can reach and accelerate our progress in closing the gender digital divide? So we are really eager for this conversation. We're eager for this partnership. We're eager for the ways that together that we can drive more ambition, drive more resources, drive more intention at really making progress, so that when we gather again in a few years' time, I hope that we can see the outcomes and see a real change in how many women are connected to the internet and to other technology and what their experience is once they are. And by doing that, we know that collectively, we will be ensuring that women and girls have a voice in digital transformation, that they have an opportunity to contribute to accelerating economic growth, to building more healthy societies, and to achieving the sustainable development goals that we all share. Thank you.
Hi, all. Thank you again so much for being here, and mostly thank you to our Airband partners who traveled from all over the world and took time out of their schedules to come and talk about the best practices and learnings from this collaboration. I'm very proud to introduce our general manager for the Airband Initiative, Vicki Robinson. Vicki has championed the work within Microsoft around digital gender equity and really asked us to think not only how it fits into the Airband Initiative, but into our larger work and how we can continue to expand it. Vicki joined Microsoft in January 2018. Actually, we joined on the same day, so shared HR trials and tribulations. After nearly 2 decades of public service in the Federal Communications Commission, in multiple leadership roles, and most recently as acting CEO and general counsel of the Universal Service Administration. Administrator of the FCC's Federal Universal Service Fund. As general manager for the Airband Initiative at Microsoft, Ms. Robinson, Vicki, draws upon her broad and deep command of universal broadband access to deliver consistent results for the company in our ambitions to help close the global digital divide, which folks will hear more about later on. A strong proponent of giving back to her community, Ms. Robinson currently serves as an adjunct instructor at Howard University's School of Law. She's a recovering lawyer as well. So is the co-founder and vice chair for the initiative Advancing the Blue and Black Partnership, and is also a board member of Public Knowledge. So please join me in welcoming Vicki to share a keynote.
So weird to hear Lydia say, Ms. Robinson. Good morning, everyone. I want to first start off by just thanking Lydia publicly for the introduction and just her tireless commitment to gender equity work. She's been focused on this since day one of joining the company, and I salute you in that. And it's wonderful to see all this coming to pass. Jamil, I want to salute you for your leadership. I'm so excited about what we've done together and what we continue to do as we move forward, because we know, to your point, as we deepen our work together to close the gender divide, that in turn will enable women to fully participate. And as a woman, I'm here for it. And then just generally welcome everyone. This is a critical moment as we gather here in connection with CSW 67, and it's really a pleasure to host. As Lydia can attest to, as soon as I heard about this event, I hoisted myself onto it because it's just amazing and exciting to see the mind share, given that we are where we are in this space. I also want to express my deep, deep, deep appreciation, just more generally, to USAID and DEI. Your team has been tireless in your commitment to gender equality around the world. And we know that if you are able to improve equality for women, that the world in turn will improve and will improve quality of life for all people. You all are valued partners, and I look forward to doing more and more together. So closing the digital divide is really my life's work. I've been doing this for more than 2 decades, and it's an honor to lead this work as Microsoft and the Microsoft Airband Initiative, which is really focused on advancing access to internet and meaningful connectivity as a fundamental right. That's an important point and an important lens in which we think about this work. Partnership is central to Airband as we lock arms with our partners here in the room, be they internet service or energy access provider partners, but also nonprofits, government agencies, and others that are laser focused on closing the digital divide. This includes, again, partnering with USAID and our portfolio of Airband partners, many of who are here today, and it's just so good to see their faces outside of a team screen. And we're doing this work through programs like Digital Invest Initiative and other projects that, again, that are focused on closing the gender digital divide. In today's world, I think that we can all agree that internet access is no longer a luxury. It's table stakes. As the Airband Initiative works to extend internet access as a fundamental right, we'd love to collaborate across private, public, and nonprofit sectors to build the digital infrastructure required for internet access and adoption, but equally as important, to support the programs and public policies that are needed to leverage the full value of connectivity to improve productivity and livelihoods, build resilient and sustainable communities, and facilitate inclusive development, particularly for women and girls. As part of our efforts, we seek to address the various divides that limit potential in the 21st century, whether it is the rural versus urban divide, but more importantly and relevant here, the gender digital divide. This work is important as it aligns to Microsoft's focus on empowering people and organizations, but it's also aligned to our business interests in extending the reach of our technology to drive digital transformation globally. But more importantly, we recognize that the freedom to learn, create, share ideas, communicate, and interact with the world requires access to the global network. Unfortunately, we have a lot of work to do. More than 2.7 billion people around the world, that's about a third of the world, are not online, either because connectivity is not available or it's not affordable or accessible. And most of those people, too often, are people who are experiencing income, food and housing insecurity, women and girls, people with disabilities, and other traditionally marginalized groups, all of which resonate with me. At the same time, we also know that 770 million people globally lack access to electricity, which is, of course, a critical requirement for internet infrastructure. But again, the digital divide for women in particular is very significant. According to the ITU's most recent data, globally, 69% of men are using the internet, while only 63% of women are doing so. And that divide is even more stark when you go to developing countries. We can do better, and we must do better. For our part, Microsoft is committed to partnering with others to extend internet access to 250 million people. That's a big number. by the end of 2025, and that includes 100 million people on the continent of Africa. Those are big numbers, but we're not just focusing on deployment of networks and infrastructure. Most importantly, we know that we must be required to address barriers to digital inclusion more generally, including affordability, access to devices, and other technology solutions that, again, can unlock the power of connectivity and the digital skills that are needed to use the internet safely and productively. So what we say at Microsoft is that while it's generally important to get the enabling digital infrastructure and connectivity and off-grid energy in place, internet access is simply a means to an end. It's a gateway and should be viewed as such to empowerment and transformation. Our focus, again, globally is on historically marginalized communities, particularly women and girls. And as part of our new partnership with USAID through their Gender Digital Equity Initiative, we will include a gender focus in every project in the Airband portfolio, full stop. Thank you. Yeah, this gets me fired up. This commitment will focus on scalable solutions, right? We've got the learnings. It's time to advance from pilot projects and science projects to doing this work at full scale. And that we know that as we'll do this, we'll bring more women and girls online. And this will again build upon our deep collaboration with USAID and others. In conclusion, I want to applaud everyone here today for focusing on solutions, not just rhetoric, but solutions to close the gender digital divide. By working together, we can drive scalable solutions and drive digital transformation in the communities that we serve, and we all need to be committed to that work. Again, I'm happy that Lydia allowed me to kind of graft myself onto this event. And with that, I'll turn it back over to her so that she can, she's our resident gender equity champ and our esteemed partners to really discuss the results and learning from our work together. Thank you.
I feel like a little bit of a game show host because I keep doing introductions, but I am now very pleased to introduce our panel. But I want to start with my co-moderator, Gwen Snyder, who I have had the pleasure of getting to know in her last 2 years with USAID. Gwen is the Senior Advisor for Private Sector Engagement and Gender Equity. She leads multiple initiatives with multiple acronyms, but she's a part of GenDev's Women Economic Empowerment team and is the activity manager for activities focused on technology, blended finance, and gender lenses, investing, GLI, including Women Connect Challenge, us, Microsoft Airband, Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs, and GenDev's buy-in activities to the Invest and Catalyze program. So I can think of no one else that I would want to co-host with. Come on up. I think we go straight to the chairs. And now I will bring up all of our Airband panelists, who I will introduce individually, but I want to bring up first Rebecca Glass from M-COPA, Senior Manager. For folks who don't know in the audience, M-COPA is an African fintech platform that provides digital financial services to underbanked consumers in Africa. And Rebecca has been driving our work around how do we get more smartphones in the hands of women and girls. So come on up to the stage. Next up, we have Maggie Hobbs, founder of Mwingu Networks and now leading their mwingu.org work, which I'm proud to say is now an official nonprofit. Maggie is focusing on how we drive more connectivity to educational institutions, how we build skilling over the top. And the Mwingu project looks specifically at how do we empower female entrepreneurs and use other private sector partners to grow that footprint. Welcome, Maggie. And next we have Lena Scholes from Bluetown, Head of Global Partnerships. Bluetown Networks is a connectivity provider focused on low cost and sustainable solutions for rural communities globally. In Ghana, we've been working with them and our partner, the Hunger Project, to connect community centers and drive internet access to women with a focus on ICT and micro-entrepreneurship training over the top. So welcome to the stage. Next, we have Sylvia Armillo from Anditel, the general manager. Sylvia has been leading our work in Colombia. As noted before, Anditel has been focused on connecting digital centers across the country and how to drive community impact using community ambassadors and women as leaders. So the centers not only provide places where women can access the internet, but where they can utilize trainings over the top, build skills, and importantly, where they can safely gather and maintain connectivity. So welcome, Sylvia. Thank you. Michael Gingold from Airjaldi is the Director of Strategy and Operations. Airjaldi is an India-based company focusing on working to increase the number of women with fast, reliable, and importantly, meaningful connectivity, contributing to their societal, economic, and individual well-being. Airjaldi has a very expansive network across the country, but is working across 6 Indian states to provide women with subsidized internet connectivity packages, internet usage exposure, and importantly, really tailored digital skills training that enable them to do it when they have the capacity and the free time. So thanks, Mikey. And lastly, certainly last but not least, Dr. Susanna Aranchea, New Sun Road Global Programs Director, who has been driving our work in Guatemala. New Sun Road is an energy access company that has deployed solar-powered digital community centers across the country, but importantly is providing digital skills training to Indigenous women and doing so in local languages that allows them to actually engage. The technology hubs are equipped with solar-powered energy systems, so it pulls in not only internet access, but energy access, and they provide an internet connection with digital literacy skills courses that are available across the community. So we're excited to have her. And now I think we have a short video before we start the official panel discussion.
While internet adoption and mobile phone ownership are on the rise, figures show staggering gaps in access for women in many regions of the world. The USAID Microsoft Airband Initiative was launched in August 2020 between Microsoft Corporation's Airband Initiative and USAID, seeking to bring internet access to more women around the world. 6 partners were selected to implement programs exploring innovative ways to make mobile phones and the internet more accessible to women in rural and semi-urban areas. New Sun Road in Guatemala, Bluetown in Ghana, Airjaldi in India, Anditel in Colombia, Mawingu in Kenya, and M-Copa in Kenya.
El Centro Digital ha sido muy importante para nosotros y para la institución porque por medio de él podemos hacer nuestras actividades, podemos consultar, imprimir cosas, etc. Podemos venir acá, investigar sobre el tema, mirar videos para así poder reforzar nuestra clase y poder hacer nuestras actividades.
The USAID Microsoft Airband Initiative has reached over 230,000 women. By putting women's needs at the center of meaningful connectivity and working toward a common goal, USAID and Microsoft can bridge the gender digital divide and develop a more inclusive user base. This initiative has demonstrated the role of technology in changing lives and creating more self-reliant communities.
Okay. Can you hear me?
You don't need to push any buttons on the microphone. We'll make them work.
Oh, amazing. Okay, cool. Well, there we go. I am also moderating this panel, so I wanted to put you on the hot seat first, Gwen. This partnership between USAID and Microsoft was launched 2.5 years ago in August 2022. What were USAID's intended goals and vision for the partnership?
Thanks, Lydia. That's a great question. And so when I think about this and I go back to 2020, there were really two different parts to it. The first was, what were our short-term goals? Our short-term goals, we wanted to partner with a world-class multinational technology corporation like Microsoft, and we wanted to help them expand their business successfully in emerging markets. And then we also wanted to, with their partnership, connect with local, on-the-ground internet service providers in these developing countries and give them the support and the expertise needed to develop tools that they could then present to potential new clients, of which we were really seeking that those were women and girls. So that was short term. And then long term, we really wanted this to make good development sense for USAID. And that means that it's working to achieve USAID's development objectives. And then also, we wanted this to make great business sense for Microsoft. We wanted this to make them money. We wanted this to be profitable. And we wanted this because ultimately, USAID's end goal is not to continue to, fund, a program indefinitely, of course. Our end goal is that the program is so successful and in terms of sustainability that it makes sense for the private sector, for Microsoft, to not just do, Airband 1.0 with the US government, but to really say, oh my gosh, this was incredible. Let's jump into 2.0. What does that look like? And they're committed. And why? Because they've grown their client base, and it includes more women. They've gotten more women connected. And then I think what is achieving both of our long-term goals, if I can speak for 2 seconds about Microsoft, is that really it's not only creating economic opportunities that women have access to, but really that they go for it, that these economic opportunities are within their grasp, because they have the skills to apply and work in these jobs and really be successful and work their way up, even in part of Microsoft's global supply chains. So these are really ambitious goals. They're hopeful goals, but I think that we're well on our way to achieving them.
Thank you so much, Gwen. So I think everyone has heard the themes around commercial sustainability and scalability. And as we think about the panel today, really thinking about what works well and what we want to bring to the table next. So I'll start off with some questions for our panelists, and I'm going to be a little targeted just because we have a larger panel. So this first question is for Sylvia and Mikey. As a technology service provider, why were you interested in participating in this initiative? How familiar were you with the topic of the gender digital divide in the countries and markets where you operate?
Thanks, Lydia. Anditel is a telecommunications company that has been serving Colombia for the past 45 years. We have specialized in bringing connectivity to the most rural places of the country. We have worked with the government for probably close to 20 years, bringing connectivity to these regions, and we've learned in these 20 years that the connectivity by itself, it's not enough. It's not transformational, and people doesn't know how to use it. So it was very important for us, this partnership, because working with Microsoft and working with USAID gave us a whole opportunity to bring new things to the table and to apply all the things that we've learned in the other projects.
Hi, good morning, everybody. So I'm going to resonate a lot of what was already said, although we've only spoken for like 5 minutes. In Air Jolly, we always like to say that we walk on two legs, and these two legs should be equally strong. One is business sense and economic sustainability. The other one is actually why are you walking, the goals of doing this. And when we looked at this initiative, it kind of at least potentially hit both of these targets. When you talk about commercial, the commercial aspects of it, as Sylvia was just saying, connectivity alone is a very shallow entry point. And if you want to increase stickiness, even from a business point of view, you really got to look at something that's more sustainable and long lasting. And that starts from demand creation or demand that exists as an end of itself. And maybe I'll talk about it a little more. The second thing is, of course, you get funding to allow you to expand your activities. Let's not mince words here. It really helps that way. But let's not leave the other leg. My strong belief, and I think that our own relative longevity attests to that, is that the kind of work that we do in rural areas and developing countries, if there is no additional pull factor apart from basically trying to make good business, may not be the best path forward. If it is one of the things you believe in, it is the best way forward. So as such, this was really a tempting proposition. There was a second part of the question. Should I address that? What did you know about the gender divide?
Sure.
Yeah. The answer is very little. Those who know me know that I think I did. Right? Don't laugh, Jalal. That's not for you. But it's amazing. It's amazing what you find actually as you try and you begin to roll out with the project. And I'll be happy to take on that later. Thanks.
I'll never forget on our first trip together, Mikey tried to convince me that women just had equal access in India. And I was like, I don't think that's true. But one of the things that came from this project is obviously all of the learnings. And you hear the theme across the partners of it's not just about connectivity, it's how you drive meaningful connectivity. And especially when we're talking about women, how you drive value so that the opportunity cost for them going online is worth it. So now to Maggie and Lena. What did your company's engagement work with women look like before this initiative, and how has it changed since the start of this activity?
So I'm a little bit with Mikey here. We were blinded by technology when we began. So I founded Mwingu with a very good friend of mine called Malcolm Brew. And it was all about TV white spaces, like proper exciting. We're gonna leapfrog everybody in the whole world, because we've got two Kenyans on two Kenyan companies on the panel. So, we obviously have a high opinion of our early adoption of things. But so we were technology driven, hit into a lot of regulatory issues, didn't really think about what the use case was at the other end, came with the assumption that if there's affordable internet, even it said affordable internet at the bottom of all of our strap lines, that was going to be enough. That was it. And absolutely, that was not enough. And we understood lots of obstacles in terms of how you make sure that the provision of internet in rural Kenya is actually really going to make sense for the people that you're trying to serve. And I think that we didn't, although I was a female founder, we didn't think enough about the gender divide. We were much more interested in rural versus urban, which is still a huge issue, to be honest with you. But within that, then there's this nuance. So we just had an interesting kind of survey done, which showed in Kenya amongst 18 to 24-year-olds, which is very part of the population I'm very interested in. We've now got a situation where obviously urban boys are up here, urban girls are here, rural boys are here, and rural girls are there. So rural rural boys and urban girls have got to about the same level in Kenya now. So we're seeing differences, but I think that for us, what this allowed very much was the breathing space and the kind of excitement to actually look at it from a business case rather than simply a development grant case to say, how do we make our business better?
Yeah. It's Lena. I'll go ahead. Sure, I have one.
Sorry.
It's all good. I think from our perspective, we had some awareness at least around this. We were measuring the gap, so we could see it very clearly in the numbers that it was there, and it was not pretty. So we've been aware of it for quite a long time, yeah, that ratio is bad, and we have been wanting to do something about it. And honestly, we also need to do something about it, because especially when we work in these very rural, maybe previously unconnected areas, we can't afford not to target 50% of the population in those communities. And the other part, of course, is that what we all know here is, and I think it was said before, that empowering women contribute to economic development. And in turn, that's what we need to do in order to get to a point where we can actually get to that sustainability part, where we don't need the funds or the projects or the grants anymore to continue offering our services in the community. So we had some awareness. We've been working on a few initiatives. We actually worked on a project with USAID before in Mozambique with a local partner there. And definitely a lot of our learnings from there were inspired into this new project. But on the other hand, I also want to say that we definitely used this opportunity to have our project to sort of ingrain it across our organization. And I think that was still lacking at the beginning of this project, is that there was some awareness, but it wasn't sort of trickled into the entire culture of the organization. And I think that's one of the things we are accomplishing. I won't say we have accomplished, we're still working on it, but we're definitely getting there in more and more. And I was happy to hear about you now bringing more, making sure that there's women's digital inclusion in all projects going forward, because that's one of our learnings, is to look and find those partners out there that have that focus already and work with them. That's one way of doing it. And I did want to bring one example up because of how we sort of have brought it into the culture, was that a few weeks ago we were talking about a new initiative we're working on where we want to digitally include more organizations and institutions in Ghana. And it was a very proud moment for me, because it wasn't me and it wasn't now the two digital women digital inclusion experts we have in Ghana. It wasn't either of us that sort of brought up that maybe we could think about how we in this initiative also could make sure that more women came online, and actually came up with some ideas about how we could target certain institutions that had more female representation. So that was sort of a big awakening for me, that it's getting through to everybody in the organization that this is important.
Great. Thank you so much. That was such a great answer. I'm going to open it up. I'm not going to pinpoint anyone, because it relates to your experience with USAID and Digital Frontiers. But I'd love to hear from two panelists. From your experience, what were the benefits of receiving technical assistance, through this program? How did it make a difference, versus if you had not partnered with, USAID and Digital Frontiers?
Yes, I'm going first. Thank you. So for us, it was very important, this technical assistance, because we bring not only infrastructure for access to solar power and internet-enabled digital community centers to rural, remote, indigenous Kekchi population, but also we bring women to the table, not only as users, but as co-creators. So we organize women in the communities so they could manage the center as their own entrepreneurial activity. And we co-create with them business models that allow us to bring really the needs of the community. And as my colleagues describe it, it's not only putting the technology and magically people starting to use it, they have to really bring it to the daily life. And I grew up in a rural village in Guatemala, and I know the impact that connectivity has for the life of a women. And thanks to the connectivity and these opportunities, I got a scholarship that allowed me to study my PhD in Spain, and another scholarship with Fulbright that allowed me to come to UC Berkeley and met Jalal Sager, co-founder of News on Road. And something that really inspired me about News on Road is that it's a public benefit company, and the priority of the company is bringing renewable energy technology and connectivity to rural remote populations. So I knew firsthand the need that we had in Guatemala with 1.5 million of people without access to electricity. And through this program, we were able to bring it. And I think that we are a startup, and as my colleagues, technology startup knows how to do technology, and that's our key feature. But through this technical assistance, we were able to bring women in a different perspective with more meaningful access to this digital literacy and other training. So thank you.
Thank you so much for adding such personal, story behind it. I mean, it's really inspiring just to see firsthand how you've benefited. Wonderful, thank you. Maybe one other partner?
I'll share as well. I think for us, it was also just very, very important, especially in the beginning of this project, to have partners that could support this work. We work with impact in many different ways. We work with partners in impact in education, in agriculture, in healthcare. And the way that we usually do that is that we have a partner come to us, or we discuss with a partner. They come in as the subject matter expert, and we bring the connectivity, and then we also bring sort of our knowledge now and experience around digital inclusion. So when we work on a project that's about women's digital inclusion, we have to be the subject matter expert, right? And that's been definitely a steep learning curve for us, something that we've been spending quite a lot of time on. And so, yeah, as I said early on, it was super important. And I'm not sure, I think it was the same for everybody, that USAID brought in and DAI brought in sort of a local gender digital expert into the project very early on. So we spent a lot of time with her early on. She talked to a lot of our users, our other stakeholders, and created this report for us. And I think, honestly, that report was sort of the starting point for all of us to really understand what it meant and what the challenges were out there, and became a big part of the foundation of the work that we did. And not only that, we also really love working with Jamila, was her name. So we brought her into the project, and she became a consultant for us, helped develop some of the training programs for semi-urban women around workforce development training programs. So that was super helpful at that time. So I know this doesn't go under sort of the maybe this part, but I also just want to underscore the importance of having a partner who understood working on these government grants, because that was definitely a first for us. We did not have any experience or in-house expertise. So just having that hand-holding throughout, someone who could sort of keep us in line and and make sure we delivered what we were supposed to was very important. And I want to mention Microsoft, of course, because we wouldn't be here without you guys. We wouldn't be able to do this work and dedicate so much time to it. And you continue to find avenues for us to continue, which we are very grateful for. So
Great, thank you so much. So this next question, I would love to hear from Jaldi and Moingo. So the question is, through the funds granted by USAID, what approaches or activities were you able to test or launch as a company that wouldn't have been possible without this program?
I think, I think it was an entire kind of approach to say, would we have taken these financial decisions in terms of our agent network and looking about the depth of the agent network and how it was set up without the prompt and the thinking, again, to start off with the gender expert? I'm not sure it would have happened, to be honest with you. But I think that what happened was we were able to test things that perhaps we got an answer that we didn't expect as well, both good and bad. And I think that the fact that it was couched in commercial terms, which is so unusual in grants of this nature. I mean, I think that's the kudos that has to be given to the thinking that's gone on here, is to say, if we're in the business of impact, which as commercial businesses, we're in the business of impact, if we can find partners who understand that there has to be both legs, as Mikey was saying, you know, if you are only working over here on impact projects and over here the commercial team are thinking about it in a totally different way, then you have an internal schism in the business as well. So what it allowed us to do was to bring all of this thinking absolutely central to everybody within the business, to think this is about Mwingu customers, full stop. This is about Mwingu agents, full stop. This is not a development project over there. So I think that was incredibly helpful, and I think we would like to operate in that way in the future, because I think commercial businesses find it very difficult to put on the Cinderella slipper of a grant. Their feet are too big, they don't fit the shoe. You want the money and you want to do the thing, but it's very hard. So if you're aligned at the beginning, it's a much more powerful way of getting to the end result that we all want to get to.
Mikey?
Yeah, so when we're thinking of what it allowed us to test, I think we need to start from the terms of the grant. And those of us who wrote the proposal would remember that it kind of, again, had two parts to it, which were supposed to come together. How do you, as a commercial internet service provider or somebody who's related to connectivity and energy, will approach the issue of women's empowerment, and how do you make sense of it as an entity, as a company? And for us as Erjaldi, when we looked at it, we had an additional, I don't know, challenge, I'd like to call it an opportunity really, which is we work across 9 states in India, and India is a rather largish subcontinent. And even within those 9 states, we are rather spread. So the idea of creating something that has a physical entity was a challenge to start with, not with the volume of funding that we got. We couldn't really do it. But out of that came the approach that we came up with, which is to say, okay, is there a way for us to create entities or groups that are groups that you bring together from different geographies around similar themes? And the tack that we chose for it, and again, I'm not going to repeat, there's a really nice summary up there, was this idea of C+3T, right? You come in with what you have to start with, and again, continuing what Maggie said, the commercial proposition, connectivity, knowing full well that that's not going to bring about full empowerment. And again, really, really interesting learnings there. And then you bring and you say, okay, hang on, what can I do to increase involvement? And you come with this idea of 3 T's, or at least we came up with this: training, tools, and tech support. And the idea of training, and then we'll have a question soon about successful and unsuccessful, but at least in theory, the idea is that training is something that should be and can be delivered and consumed at chunks that your customers are capable of consuming. And needless to say, I'm preaching to the choir here, most of our users just cannot take 2 weeks off to learn digital skilling. And I've spent, I don't know what, I'm about 25, so about 25 years trying to, the last 25 years trying to be digitally skilled. 2 weeks is not enough, of course. So this idea that the consumption and the idea that you bring and support to those consumers, to those users, when they hit a snag, and everybody hits a snag. If there wasn't a snag, we would all be doing the Harvard online courses and we'd be graduating with, whatever degree it is that we thought we needed. To test this, we wouldn't have done this on our own, to be honest. It's just, it's a big lift. And again, Maggie was saying, you got to make sense to your board. What's the up here, right? And 2 years into this, there are really, really interesting learnings in terms of how this really becomes a useful approach. So yeah, hope it answers.
Thank you so much. I'm actually going to open this one up to the group because I think it really relates to the last question, which is, what are the successful and proven strategies that you've employed that you found work really well to both target and engage women as customers and internet users? And then importantly, what strategies weren't successful? Because I think, we need to be honest that we grow from our failures, and we tried a lot of things that didn't in the end work. So I'd be interested to hear thoughts on that.
For us, this was the first time that we had a program targeted to women. And going back to the last question, we wouldn't have done it without the help of Microsoft and the grant. Definitely, when we got the opportunity, it was our first time also with working with USAID, so we didn't know how to formulate the program or what to do. And after a lot of meetings with Microsoft and with the expert and with different people around the country that worked in different companies empowering women, we decided to find to partner with another USAID program that was helping the economic development of some women around the country. So we chose to work with these organizations that were of women in the cocoa production and beekeeping, as Lydia said. And that was a great success because we had these women, we had no access to connectivity, but that were already organized, that were learning and were developing technical skills on cocoa and beekeeping, and were like open to learning anything that we had. We built the networks. We built one network in Tumaco, which is in the Pacific coast of Colombia, and another one in the center of the country. And we selected one woman from each one of the places that were leaders among their communities, and we trained them so they were in charge of training and managing the community centers, the digital centers. I think that was super important in the success of the program, because these women collaborated with their peers, taught them, accompanied them in each one of the different courses. We not only had digital training, which it was amazing because almost 90% of the women who took the training finished the 60 hours of training that we developed for them. But also we had weekly meetings in which all the different topics were selected by them. So we talked about their role within the communities, their role within society, their role with their husbands, the how they could be empowered and how important they were in the society. The name of our project was Digital Women, Rural Women, Agent of Digital Transformation. And that's what we wanted with the program, to have these women become agents of change within their communities. So the impact of the project was not only that of the moment of the project, but it would last with them, their families, and the rest of the society in those communities.
I would like to answer too. So I think that one of our most successful strategies was organizing women in the community in women's leadership committees. Because first they were democratically elected in the communities, and so they were recognized by the community male leaders. There are community councils in Guatemala named COCODES, and also they were organized with our local staff. So that's key, having local staff, indigenous women that could be role models for them. And also we use organizing methodology from Professor Marshall Gans in Harvard Kennedy University that allow us to organize with a shared purpose, norms, identify actors, and create this shared purpose to achieve the main goal that for them was managing the centers and keeping it working beyond this project. And I think that that was very successful. From the not so successful experiences or learnings from this project is that we were very focused on the technology and digital literacy for women and girls. And we created this loan program that was amazing because we used all the Microsoft free resources for digital literacy. And 300 women were completely trained during 7 months, and 99% of the women evaluated increased their digital skills from none to basic or above basic. And also we did another short trainings with 1,000 women, so that was great. But the women managing the centers needed more follow-up, so we have to implement more one-to-one because they need to practice more in other soft skills, like how to deal with clients. Why do I deserve money for my work? Something as simple that women didn't want to accept money for working in the centers because it was their responsibility as community women. So we have to deal with those things. And additionally, we noticed that we were adding more working women because additionally to go to the center to work, they have to clean at home, take care of their kids, cook, and it was just a lot. So what we learned is that we have to implement more positive masculinities training, so we can include the community leaders, we can include also fathers, husbands, so they can share responsibilities at home, and these women can really achieve this equality that we are searching, right? So thank you.
That's so interesting to hear that it's the same same issues and strategies that work globally. I think that was definitely one of the big sort of learnings for me personally as well, was sort of the importance of including men in this project. Like I had sort of set out and said like, oh, this is all about women, this is only for women, but I learned from our great partner at the Hunger Project that was not the case. And again, the same thing. We had a partner who was on the ground, who was working locally with local leaders. And that was just a game changer. And I think it has to be that way when you go into these communities. So definitely a big part of it. We also spend a lot of time on sort of community awareness, and especially in connection to livelihood, how we could make sure that we sort of brought to the attention of these women, particularly how they can actually increase or help their livelihood through the internet. So we spent quite a lot of time on training that through our micro operator program. So local operators that were helping women. Something as simple sometimes as finding some videos on how you could increase your crop yields, or how you could find a new profession in some instances after you lost your livelihood during COVID or things like that. So a lot of things around livelihood I think is important. And I think someone mentioned that it matters that it's meaningful, the content that you actually bring to these women. So that's a big part of it. And also just to make sure that in the services that we offer, that we set targets, that we make sure that women actually access the services, because it is often, so for instance, we have a lease to own phone program as part of our project, and it's easy or there's always men that sort of come in and say, hey, we can pay it off faster, or we can pay up front, we don't need to make those loans, but actually set a target and saying we need to have at least 60% of these phones given out to women is super important as part of this. And sort of on the downside, I think for us, it's a lot about accessibility to the internet, is that there's still restrictions, right? We can't reach the most rural areas of all communities with the connectivity we have available, at least. And that is still an issue, while we, through this project, have been able to actually access more rural communities with training through digital means, or the microfinancing through someone going there and helping them, include them in that sense. We still have areas that are very rural where we can't find that sustainable angle for connectivity, and why projects like these are just so important, so we can do a lot more in that space.
Thank you all. Mikey, I'm gonna cut you off because I want to use this segue to affordable devices to pick on you, Rebecca. Since, out of the portfolio of projects, yours was a bit different. MCOPA is not an internet service provider, but you are working directly with women as customers, and obviously have a vested interest in growing that part of your portfolio. So, as you think about how your model changed when you were looking at engaging women as customers, what were sort of the surprising findings? Was there anything that stood out to you that you really hadn't gone into it with thoughts around?
I think similar to some of our panelists here, I think that also the timing of this partnership couldn't be better. We commercially, thanks also to sort of initial help from the Microsoft Airband Initiative, we commercially launched our pay-as-you-go smartphones in 2020. And we sort of, thought, okay, we've cracked the affordability model. Pay-as-you-go, small upfront deposit, 50 cents a day, women can have access to smartphones and therefore access to internet, and it can be life-changing. And I think we were quite quickly humbled that that was not the case, that just because we have a product that we think is transformational doesn't mean, one, it is reaching women, and two, that awareness and sort of salience of this is a transformational product for you is being shared with women. So I think that first and foremost was something we had to learn and unlearn and be very intentional about, and test solutions to meet women where they are, where she is, and not assume that they'll come to us. So we sort of was highlighted in one of the videos. We ended up working with over 500 chamas in Kenya, which are rural women's savings groups, to ensure that the women that we weren't reaching and had the highest access barriers when it comes to internet, that we were coming to them. And we were also able to explain to them what a product like a smartphone internet can do, and also provide some digital skills training. I think the other sort of one key thing that we hadn't even thought about when we were designing this project was how critical our sales agents are. And I love the fact of sort of agents of change. For us, that's quite literal. So our model is based on our huge sales agent network, who are women and men recruited from their own communities. And these are particularly women who are also using a smartphone for income generation, some of which for the first time as well. And that these are equally also our agents are the ones who engage with our customers, who find our customers. So really actually working very closely with them to understand from them, what are the barriers you're facing? Why aren't you selling more why are you selling more to men than women? What are these barriers? And where within MCOPA's control and the very complicated dynamic of gender equality can we help support our agents to overcome some of those barriers? So that was incredible to have that sort of freedom and ability to test solutions there to support our agents in particular.
So last question from me as as we wrap up this panel, and it's such a great discussion, so rich and insightful. So Lydia, I will turn back to you and round us out. What was the greatest benefit of this partnership to Microsoft? And also, how does this initiative align with Microsoft's existing work and larger objectives?
Thanks, Gwen. And I feel a little silly answering this question because I think all of our partners probably answered it much better than I can. But as we think about Microsoft overall, our mission as a company is to empower every person and organization on the planet to do more. And we know that that's not possible without internet connectivity. So this is very much both a moral and commercial imperative for us. As the Airband Initiative, as Vicki mentioned, our focus is on extending access to affordable and meaningful connectivity, which for us means it's at a speed and reliability where people can use it productively with no judgment around what that usage looks like. And we believe that's a fundamental right. So as we think about our model overall, this is really critical because I think it goes without saying, but obviously if you aren't targeting half the population, then we aren't really doing our work very well. And I think as we think about how that fits into the ecosystem with USAID, as was highlighted again and again, what this partnership enabled us to do is really give our partners the space and expertise to experiment. They're technology companies. We're a technology company. This is not our area of expertise. And so having the expertise from USAID, having the resourcing on the ground, and having a like-minded partner who wanted to focus on commercial and scalable solutions was really critical for us, and is surprisingly hard to find. So, being able to come to the table together really made a huge difference. And I think what we've seen is this has just sort of been the tip of the iceberg. We have seen sort of the best practices and learnings from these projects, and how do we take the new, far more ambitious and larger goals that we have as an organization, and how do we really build that fundamental gender focus in, and take the best practices and help scale those across not only these partners, but our entire partner portfolio. And again, the space and the expertise and just the overall support that USAID gives is really critical for us being able to do this as a company. I couldn't probably have gone to the table on my own and said, we need to make this a central focus. But when we have a trusted partner who's offering support in this area, we can make the case for it. Thanks.
Fantastic answer.
Back to my game show host. And I think now we're actually opening it up to the floor for questions. If folks have anything from the audience, don't all jump at once.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's been great to hear. I'm Cassie from Exion, and we work in financial inclusion. So obviously, this is very resonant for us. I wanted to hear from all of you, or whoever was willing, just about what do we think are the next big hurdles? Because obviously, where you're working has, as you have all stated, there's lots of hurdles, right? But what's the next big one that we're all going to have to climb together?
I'll just jump in since we work in financial inclusion as COPA. I think it's sort of been mentioned a couple of times, but access is, baseline. Like a woman needs access to the internet, needs access to tools that can provide that access to internet, but what's next? And for us, I think one of the key takeaways from this whole project has also been intentionality. And that has been such a wonderful gift for us to be able to look at our whole product portfolio, our sales model, and think, how can we be more intentional about designing follow-up products and services that actually meet a woman's needs? And so for us within MCOPA, like we said, a smartphone, we see that as a tool that can open up a world of opportunity. And so for us, other digital financial services and products are next on our list. And we actually are being very intentional now about researching with a gender lens of understanding, okay, what type of different, when it comes to cash loans or insurance products, what type of value of a loan does a woman need? What type of frequency of what's her cash flow like? What's the use case like? How can these products also support her in income generation and products and other opportunities? So I think that for us it's what's next.
I think from a word of caution, I've lived in Kenya for 30 years. So we're seeing now this incredible change that the internet is also allowing, and the access to devices. But with it comes a lot of danger. And I think that why it's very specifically worrying in markets like Kenya is it's one of the final markets. Everybody is very excited about selling credit to countries like Kenya. And it is not coming with very much government regulation. So the things that we would take for granted in the markets we've been playing with in previously are not there. So a lot of young people don't have parents or trusted figures in their lives that could tell them perhaps when things are not a good idea. So the parents themselves don't understand it. So you're selling products to people who don't have support networks around them. If you think about all the ways that we've learned from our parents and from trusted adults and teachers and the lives that we've lived, that isn't happening there. So there is, for me, do I stay up at night by being someone who's bringing internet into Africa? Sometimes. Because I think that the context of what I can control and not control on that. So I would say it has worries for me. Online betting in Kenya now is a giant problem. I mean, giant problem for 18 to 25-year-olds. We're seeing a very, very high suicide rate amongst young Kenyan men because they think this is a job. They literally think gambling is a job. Don't worry, I know about the, they say things like, I know about the premium, the Premier League or whatever. This is something that I can game, that I can do to get money for my family. So there is a lot, I think, that has to be couched into those terms. And there's a responsibility on all of us when we're thinking about things like gender, but also thinking about what are the unintended consequences of what we're bringing, this fabulous, connection to the world, when perhaps a lot of the other safeguarding that we would expect in markets like the States or in Europe is not in place.
So I don't know if I can say this now, but sort of, so I completely understand that part of it. But also now we've been working in a sandbox of a project for a year and a half. And I think for us is the scaling part, right? Like, how do we broaden this out to a lot more people? You heard the numbers that Microsoft presented today. It's a lot of people that we need to reach. And it takes an effort every time. And how do we get to a point where we can do this within a reasonable time frame with limited resources, get to a lot more people? I think that's one of the challenges we see, and at the same time address all these issues that arise with it. So.
For us, one of the biggest things that we worry about is the sustainability. And how do you bring the connectivity and have people actually pay for the connectivity in the rural areas? When you see that in most of these areas, there's no money running around. They trade in potatoes and in chickens, and so it's very difficult. Also, the Colombian government has been somehow very successful in bringing connectivity to these places. So people expect the connectivity to be for free. So teaching the people that they need to pay for part of this connectivity, that's the one of the challenges that we have. In this project, we used to have 11 digital centers. We have been able to maintain 6, and we're building a new one, 7, all in Tumaco. And for the first time, we have been able to start having a contribution or having the associations pay for part of that connectivity. And of course, the rest is subsidized with different other companies that we brought in place after this project. But giving it like a value and having people pay for it, that's the most difficult thing for us.
We also have a lot of learnings, and I think that's something of the most interesting is understanding what are the most successful digital community centers, talking about business and economically, and if this is related with location or with gender barriers or other type of issues. And with this project, we were able to install 10 digital community centers in Alta Verapaz, and then we won last year USAID Mujer Próspera Challenge that allowed us to create, and thanks Microsoft too, we were able to install another 10 centers in Huehuetenango, and we will install another 10 in 2 months. And our goal is 3,000 centers in 5 years. So understanding the economic and how they can keep being profit is the most important. And so far, with the 10 centers that we created with this project, at least 5 are already profit. One is being used only for support of the community because they have a mold slide with the storms last year, and the other 3 is still below profits, but we are working on the business models.
I just wanted to add, please go ahead, Mike.
We all have to answer? I do have something to say, but
I just wanted to add, because I didn't hear it mentioned, but I think along the same lines as this betting phenomenon in Kenya is absolutely technology facilitated gender-based violence. And what we saw from a fintech company was that in the first 8 months of COVID, we jumped ahead in terms of digital technology 5 years. And that was just the first 8 months. And this was a multi-year global pandemic. And so I think it's so important that we think about not just regulation with governments, but also the guardrails that really can and should be put in place to protect women and girls from technology facilitated gender-based violence. And it is broad. It is bullying. It is shaming. It's really it has such a high emotional impact on women and girls, and it can really lead them possibly to shun technology for years and really limit their economic opportunities. And not only that, as another panelist noted on in another forum last week, if we don't get this right the first time around and put those safeguards in place and the damage happens, it is so much harder to correct it down the road. It just takes more. Yep, exactly. You have to be thoughtful and intentional from zero. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
I have a question for the panelists. With regards to social and cultural norms, did you face any unexpected challenges or any pushback from members of the community implementing a program focused on women and elevating women? Would love to hear your responses.
Okay, yes, definitely. At the beginning of the project, we talked with the community councils, and in Alta Verapaz, they were more open to receive a project that was focused on women. But once the women started to get money, to have a voice, the dynamics in the community started to change, and some community leaders started to really try to gain power and try to manage the centers by their own. So we have to bring in other strategies with these positive masculinities, but also the Women's Leadership Committee trained to the community leaders, and basically it's working, but it's challenging. But then in other regions, in Huehuetenango, that is beyond this project, we had the experience of going to some communities where they really didn't have any interest of working with a project focused on women. So we just started with the base of communities that were open to work with women, even if we know we will have challenge, but yeah.
In our case, we didn't have any issues having a gender based project. We opened the centers for the entire community. We train probably close to like 75% of the trainings and the activities were attended by women, but we had men attend the centers and do the training and participate. Also in these communities, most of them didn't have cellular access. So the only point of communications were the centers. So all the community was happy to have them.
I think that just because we had a partnership on the ground who was already focused on empowerment of women and including men in that helped a lot. But we still saw, like, we had these internet centers, right? And there was just more men present there than women, right? Like that was a given probably in most days. And I remember going in there and we talked about it, and there were two siblings. The school was just coming out, and the girl had to go home and cook for the family, and the boy could stay and game. And I think so there's still a lot of challenges that needs to be worked on. And it sounds like some of you have actually worked and solved some of these challenges, which is amazing to hear. So there's still definitely a lot more work. And talking about the violence or the safety of women, I think that's also a factor, right? Is to consider how we can make sure that there's space for women to access the internet in these communities as well.
That's another question. I don't know about time. There was happy to answer.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions from the room?
Mine is a very quick one. Maggie, I think you spoke about the dangers and the fears of all of it. And I think you also spoke about, your next steps going into digital financial services. I see a rising case of cyber fraud, especially when it comes to fintechs. And I sit in networks of women in Uganda who are using fintechs to do amazing things, but now there's a huge fear, especially in Kenya, SIM swap fraud. I think Safaricom is even in court for that. So what are some of the lessons that are actually being put into place, or what are some of the thoughts in terms of digital skills that are being built specifically for the cyber security aspect? Thank you.
It's an incredible, critical element that we're right now also really trying to tackle. I think for us, customer, because of our model is based on a sales agent network, we've previously been very reliant on our agents are the ones that hold the relationship and initial contact and education with our customers. And it's harder to control that. But one of the things we're working on, actually, it was another learning from this partnership, this Airband USAID partnership, was we were able to create a digital learning platform for our agents to better be able to access through their smartphone, access all of their agent training, but also specific modules on elements and issues we thought were important. So one of the modules is actually how to better engage with women customers, how to change your approach, and also actually weaving in a lot of the social impact that does happen, education that does happen when women have that digital access. But actually part of that, what we're trying to do now is we now have an M-COPA app that our customers can use to pay and contact customer service. So actually one of our goals down the line is to actually be able to, through the app, offer a similar customer education platform. We're not there yet, but that's sort of our main goal, because we realize there's a lot of education that has to happen.
I suppose from my point of view, we're going to see a sort of reversal of roles. And so for me, one of the interesting things about the gender inclusion is to really look at sort of 18 to 24-year-old young women and understand that that is probably the key of how we're going to do a lot of the peer-to-peer and trust network training. So I think that in our society, perhaps we would think grown-ups would do it, or in the societies in the West. I think what we're seeing is that trust is the most important thing, and who do you trust to tell you whether it's a good or a bad thing. And it's going to be trial and error to a certain extent, but the more that the people within your own family are trained, someone is trained within there, that at least you'll be able to talk to each other about it. There's a lot of isolation around it at the moment, I think. So yeah, I think it's a giant problem, and we live perhaps without very much government ability to regulate it, and there's quite a lot of Wild West in terms of people coming into the market and allowing things, where government should be protecting us, it's perhaps not so much. But I think we all as businesses, responsible businesses, have to take our responsibility, and we have to learn the lessons perhaps of other tech platforms who in the last 10 years haven't taken that responsibility. I think we can see how difficult that is to unravel later. We might as well all wake up to the fact that we are part of this, we're bringing it, and so we have to make sure that everything we do tries to not allow those bad things to happen.
I think just quickly from the Microsoft side as well, because obviously this is something that we think about a lot. We've talked a lot about the intentionality of building women into the projects from the very beginning. And I think to your point, we need to be really intentional about building in these basic digital skills, best practices online. And one of the exciting things that has come out of these projects is trainings that are created around exactly that. I mean, Mikey, I think of what you're doing in terms of the micro content, and this isn't Microsoft specific. This is, how do you get on an app? How do you, where can you give your financial information? What are safe platforms to use? And as we think about continuing to scale and grow from this, I think it's really critical that we not only have those materials, but we have them in local languages, that they're customized, and they're actually user-friendly.
The biggest challenge, in a sense, it goes back to what's successful and what's unsuccessful. You can curate and create solutions to problems that you think are going to be there. We have Lydia alluded to our training. We have a whole unit that deals with cybersecurity, starting from shaming and going on to human trafficking. Nobody spoke about trafficking here. Big issue. By the way, men as well, for different reasons. The problem that you have is there's got to be a demand. You can try and, as they say, bring the horse to the water, but drinking is a whole different ballgame. And that's the challenge, especially with safety and security. It's a bit like, I don't know, don't have a good analogy, but perhaps like car insurance. You don't know that you need it until you need it, and if you haven't done it by then, right? So going forward, I mean, when it comes, again, going back to the question, yeah, what's the next big one? The next big one is, that there is a yawning gap between connectivity and adoption. India has 830 million people statistically connected to broadband. Does anyone want to venture a guess how many people are on fixed connection, wireless or fiber? Huh? A bit too low. About 30 million, right? That yawning gap tells us a lot about adoption. And the next big thing, is, again, how do we actually convince them not only of the dangers, but also of the possibilities?
About cybersecurity. For us, something that really helps is partnering with the government. In Guatemala, they have a secretary against sexual violence and human trafficking. They have apps and content, and we translate it to the Mayan Quechua language, and it helps us to support women in that way, but it's a big issue.
Mindful of time, I just want to say a quick thank you to all our panelists. There also will be time afterwards if folks have individual questions and want to meet, but I'll invite Tom up for some remarks, and our panelists can all go back to their seats. You don't have to sit up here for it.
Thank you, Lydia and Gwen and all these wonderful panelists here. It's just thank you, Microsoft, for hosting us here today. Vicky, Jamila, nice to actually physically see people together. It's kind of a nice refreshing change. But I also just want to thank, particularly everyone in the room, but especially the partners up here for flying here, from around the world to talk about your experiences with the program. And thank you to Microsoft for being such a wonderful partner in this initiative to close the gender digital divide. And there's actually a group of people here that aren't in the room that I really do want to acknowledge the work that DAI has done. Stephanie Creed is in the room. Revi Sterling, who was really in many ways the inspiration of this program. And frankly, all the gender advisors that we basically dispatch to each of these companies for what, 3 to 6 months, generally speaking. They're kind of the unsung heroes of this. In fact, we joke around about this project to say is like, in many ways, what smaller, independent, competitive ISPs and other companies, like, what they need to do is adopt a social scientist, right? And so in a way, that's the theory behind this program, was to provide that kind of education outreach, the type of thing. And I think it was either Mikey or Maggie said it, or they both said it, which is like, when you're running a business and you're starting up a business, you're trying to run a business. You're not trying to solve the ills of the world. Generally speaking, maybe you're trying to solve one problem, but then you run into another problem and challenge. So really, it's kind of gratifying, particularly based on my own personal experience, having come from the competitive and independent telecommunications industry in the United States. The perspective, it's nice to see your hypothesis borne out, which is that companies that are on the ground in the field, that are local and independent, they have the tools, the capabilities, and the capacity to really solve this challenge. But what they don't have is the ability to hire the social scientists to help them identify what it is, or even the methods or tools, or even to think in terms of, and it's through no one's fault. But like, this is how we start to close the divide, is providing these kind of tools and capacities to the companies that really will start to see the business. In many ways, closing the gender digital divide was probably not in the original business plan of many of these companies. And for the companies like them, they're starting in the future, it's not going to be part of their business plan yet. And what we intend to do, over the coming years is kind of change that perspective and provide tools and capabilities. So I'd like to, as we wrap up here, I'd like to echo the comments that Jamila and Vicky and the other panelists, really presented about the urgency of closing the gender digital divide. We can work together, private sector, civil society, government, and donors. But to reiterate, we kind of know what needs to be done. We know how to solve these challenges. What we've been missing is sufficient commitment, follow through, and dedication, and really the field knowledge and presence of the organizations that we saw here today to really move the needle substantially. So that's what we're going to do moving forward at USAID. As Jamila noted, what's been missing are these tools platforms. We're very excited about the partnerships that Jamila, started to discuss, and to rolling out, these initiatives and these commitments going forward, and to working with companies like Microsoft, as well as other partners that we hope to grow and expand over the coming years, to really accelerate this initiative to achieve, true digital gender equality. I also wanted to talk very briefly about, kind of a similar, initiative that we're also doing with USAID, and a further partnership with a project called Digital Invest that we're working on at USAID, which is to work together with partners like this, to look at community anchor institutions like schools, health clinics, government offices. We're now working on expanding our work with Microsoft Airband to increase broadband in these unserved and underconnected institutions that serve women and girls, but also young men, as well as local business communities, as well as learners of all ages and sizes. Through this program, we're going to be piloting an incentive fund for internet service providers that will help connect some of these key community anchor institutions with meaningful connectivity, including schools, clinics, local government facilities, and we will place a particular emphasis on institutions that serve women and girls in the course of this project. You'll be hearing more about this in the coming weeks. It is a true beta test. This program started off from a hypothesis a couple of years ago in the conference room that Lydia and I and a few others developed to say that we can start to make some measurable improvement in the gender digital divide. This program that we're working on with community anchor institutions is also work based off a hypothesis that these community institutions are actually really effective tools and methods, not only for solving the adoption gap, but even helping us close some of the sticking availability gaps that we see in many rural communities around the world. So we look forward to further partnership opportunities with Microsoft Airband, the technology service providers that we saw here today, as well as to other public and private stakeholders. And with that, I will open the door to other questions, but if not, we will dispatch over to lunch and some networking. And I really do appreciate everybody's attendance here today, and for such a successful program and heartwarming, stories, but also encouraging to know that we actually can start to solve this challenge, and we're putting the building blocks into place to overcoming these issues. Thank you.